And we are mobile. We are moving forward, advancing with the advance of the universe. And how are you today, Barrett?
I'm doing really pretty good. It's another nice sunny day, and highs in the 80s here, and it just feels like summer. I've been enjoying like even the summer evenings. This is the peak of the Perseid meteor shower, and you know, I haven't actually seen any this year, but I've talked to a lot of people who've been doing that, and it's one of my favorite times of year. When I was a kid, I would go out in the fields. In the middle of the night, I'd wake up and because it was optimal viewing and get out a lawn chair and go lay out and just, yeah, I mean, probably see 30 or 40 meteors while I was out there. Um, so there's sort of a certain romance, I think, to that for me, a sense of beauty in space. And uh, this time always reflects that for me.
Yes, the heavenly dance. It is very enjoyable, and actually, it comes at it's well coordinated with passage of the moon this year because you can see the meteors better if there isn't a lot of moonlight out there, and we're getting close to a new moon now. So it is very, very dark skies for people who like to get out and watch phenomena that are going on in the universe. So yes, it's a beautiful time of year, and of course now we're beginning to move into the season of harvest. The sweet corn has arrived, and we're beginning to see the squash come in, and different types of fruit. The cherry harvest is pretty much over, but now we're moving toward peaches and plums and apricots and blueberries, I think, are still around, and then we move toward pumpkins and apples. So
It's true. I love this time of year. I actually do have some Michigan peaches here, and they're the juiciest, sweetest peaches. Oh my God, so good. Just keep one
yes,
in your face.
and yes, and this of course is we like to think about the eternal cycle, the eternal change, but that's just one of the happier parts of the dream that we have been co-creating here in this realm, because in truth there are no cycles. It is an eternal state of, I guess you could say, harvest, because God has given us everything and it's always there. We're always able to enjoy the bounty of God's magnitude and magnanimity. And so here in our different cycles of seasons, we have to appreciate these brief passages because winter is going to be following, and within that, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get through those snow drifts when they start piling up. But then we have the promise of spring and then summer once again. So here we're seeing the wheels spinning, 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 and there are enjoyable aspects of it, but eventually we start to realize, this is distracting me from getting back to that place where the harvest is always in full force.
Yeah, I think there's a saying like "Stop the ride, I want to get off," or "Stop the world, I want to get off." You know?
Yes.
The wheel keeps spinning, but we can choose that we don't really want to be on the wheel anymore. And I think at a certain point in most people's spiritual practice, they get to that point. They say, I've had the highs, I've had the lows. Why don't I find that place in me that is beyond all highs and lows? And that's really what we're going for. I mean, it's a all-encompassing goal, and it's encompassed in the word in the Course creation, which is kind of a confusing word. We hear creation and we hear like making things, making things happen in the world, or kind of like doing things. And Jesus uses that word in the Course quite differently. I think as you were going to share a little bit more about that, right, Chris?
Absolutely, yes. I think it's interesting how, when we look at the purest state of, that era before all of this madness came into being, God had awareness only of God, because God is the only thing that does exist. And so when we were in our original state, God, within hers, its sense of beingness, decided that, gee, it'd be fun to have somebody here with me. But not being able to conceive of individuals, God could only imagine itself, because God is totality. So God created itself into infinity. And that in itself is very hard for us to comprehend in this realm of beginnings and endings. Just the idea of infinity alone is something that makes us kind of stop and ponder. But then within that, since we were created in God's image and likeness, we were also given that capacity to, and that need, that desire to create also. So this is what that whole idea in the Course is all about, of co-creation. It's not asking God to help you go build a sandcastle so that you can stand on the shore and watch the tide rip it out from underneath you. It is that process of extension of your divine self into infinity. And for me, that has become very, very salient in this current cycle I am in, because I'm surrounded by you and Stephen and a number of other people in my life. And I've also wondered about this, because even as a child, I noticed that everybody around me, I end up stepping into a fatherly role. I also felt like, oh, these are all my kids. You know, I should pick them up when they fall down. I should dust them off when they get dirty. And so that paternal thing has always been a part of my nature. And as I get more deeply into the Course, I'm starting to realize, yes, because all of us are co-creators with God, and we are creating ourselves into infinity also. So everybody you meet is either a parent or a child in one sense. And if you feel that compulsion to nurture and to love and to appreciate individuals that surround you, then you're beginning to recognize that tiny sliver of the dawning of reality within your own mind, of how you are not separate, and how all of this and all of us are part of one incredibly profound creation that is ever recreating itself and expanding in all directions.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful point. You know, the way that a lot of this terminology is used in the Course. You know, the words Father and Son are in the Course, I don't know how many thousands of times. And it's that metaphor. You know, we think back to Jesus using the term Father to describe God, and I think at that point that may have been a little departure. You know, the Old Testament God was a God of fear and vengeance. You know, a God that picked people who were his chosen people, and everyone else was kind of left out to dry. And we're talking about a father and a son who are not really separate, and they're not exclusive. There's no one who's left out of that union. And these terms really are metaphor that help us to know that deeper truth, that there really is no distinction that's meaningful. There really is no separation that exists. You know, one way that Jesus describes that in the Course is that we are a oneness joined as one. Well, it's beautiful, but like you were saying, Chris, it's pretty abstract. You know, what does that mean? How do we get a grasp on that? And ultimately, we can't be satisfied with an intellectual explanation for it. But we will be satisfied when we have an experience of it. So the Course is always directed towards us to actually experience this love that is our truth. You know, words about love are not going to make us happy. An experience of love will. So I think as we think about these ideas of father, son, parent, child, um, these relationships ultimately get subsumed into that oneness relating with itself. And in that place, uh, there is only that endless love that we're talking about.
Yes, the ecstatic experience, the ecstasy of it all, of knowing our divinity and our perfection and our fullness and our richness and our shared joy is really kind of an astonishing journey to uh, begin to advance on. And I don't think that people put enough emphasis on that, that as you get more and more into the course, you get more and more uh, evolved into that journey, that process. The other day I had a person reach out to me via Facebook, and they said, well, ever since I became enlightened, I've felt more and more alone. I don't have anybody to talk to. And I thought, well, I hate to break this to you, but you may not be enlightened yet, because one of the attributes of enlightenment is that realization that it is impossible to feel or to be alone, because the whole brink of entering into that realm is based on your realization that you're not just surrounded by a bunch of stuff, but you are the entire universe. You are the entire cosmos. And seeing that within yourself means that you could never feel lonely or isolated or polarized in any way.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I hear a lot of people talking about being awakened, and I guess to me that has the same connotation as enlightenment, which is it's all the way. You're in that love. You're without exception. You're knowing that truth, and nothing can shake that foundation that you're resting on. So I think it is helpful to keep those terms kind of used in that exclusive or end of the journey kind of way, because otherwise they sort of become less meaningful as we're moving forward. So it's not always easy to pop someone's spiritual ego bubble, but sometimes it kind of maybe is helpful to them on their journey. Yeah.
Yes, actually, I remember many, many years ago, a good friend, a person who is now a very close friend. At that point, I had just met the individual, and the first thing he said to me was, "Well, Chris, I want you to know that I do not have an ego. I have completely eliminated my ego, and I am beyond all of that ego stuff." And I said, I don't think so. And then I pointed out, I said to him, the only way that I could see you is if you do have an ego. Because if you remove your ego, you are once again completely joined and immersed in God, and you would be very much invisible to me in this physical realm. And he went away and pondered that for about 6 months, and finally came back and said, well, I wasn't really angry with you, but, that was a kind of a sudden jolt that you imparted to me. So, yes, we do have to recognize all of the ways that our ego utilizes our spiritual inclination, our spiritual need and desire to take up the journey, to take up the pilgrim's journey, and it will turn it around on us, and it will light us up.
Yeah.
And it'll then, beat the daylights out of us with a sack of Christmas presents.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a really helpful topic, because there are a lot of different ways that the ego can use our spirituality or our status as a student of A Course in Miracles. And sometimes it's just kind of sharing the concepts of A Course in an unkind way. Obviously, Chris and I have talked about it over and over again, how ultimately this world is a dream, it's an illusion, it's not our reality. Well, it doesn't mean that as you start to get this idea that you should go out and tell everyone in your life that their world is a dream, it's an illusion. That usually is an unkind thing to do. It usually is not very compassionate. Just because you're accepting these truths don't mean that you actually have to share them with anyone. These can be just for you, and I'm not saying you should keep it secret or hidden. But I am saying that you should listen into your own internal guidance before you start going on a rant about what the Course is saying, or have the strong impulse. You need to tell someone that they're projecting onto you, and that to kind of use these Course concepts in ways that are really kind of a subtle attack. And I mean, I know I've fallen into it, and I think everyone who's walked the spiritual path has done that to a certain extent. But to realize it's an avenue that we can pursue, I think helps us to know, okay, maybe I can avoid some of those pitfalls, and maybe I can stumble a little less around that. There are some kind of great but kind of sad stories that really epitomize this. Like people who are Course students going to a funeral and wearing like bright clothes and telling people there that death isn't real, that they didn't really die, and it's really kind of unkind to do that generally. Maybe it's a little different if it's an entire Course community, but most of us are not in that, and we need space to mourn, because we do believe this world is real. So I think kind of the guiding principle for me is the thought of gentleness. Is what you're sharing a gentle thing to do? Does it come from that soft, welcoming place, or is there an edge in it? Is there a desire to kind of say, I know the truth and you don't, to someone? And just hear what's behind your motivations to kind of use the Course in conversation or in relationships with people, and you'll start to get that distinction. You'll start to know when it's coming from a genuine desire to be of help, and when it's coming from a desire to kind of have your own way. So
Exactly. Yes. And one of the things that we're all, as we begin to, launch into this, the various different levels of the journey, is we get to that one plateau where we're excited to point out to everyone around us, oh, you're talking from your ego. And when I encounter that one, I usually stop and gently remind them that the only way you can see my ego is from the lofty heights of your own ego. So you really have to recognize what's going on here, because we are 99.9% of the time in this material world, we are seduced into putting all of our power into the ego. And when you look at it from that aspect, it's very humbling, because then you realize how much growth that is standing in front of you as we're growing out of the ego collectively. Because every small step you take in your own personal journey is shared with everybody that is now, that has ever been, or will ever be. So the healing factor is shared. The ego factor is your own personal descent back into a very unpleasant world that you don't need to perpetuate.
yeah, exactly. And I'll kind of maybe start to wind down this particular topic with one more story about it. There were a number of people that were in a Course study group, and one of them got very ill and was hospitalized. And members of the Course study group visited that person in the hospital and said to them, don't you know that sickness is a defense against the truth? That if you really wanted to, you could stand up and leave this room. So this is an example of level confusion that's kind of painful to hear about. It's really using these principles to again, from that spiritual ego perspective. Because generally when someone is sick, the kindest thing to do to them is to be comforting, is to be kind, is to hold their hand while they're sick, and to say words that are loving. So let's just use these kind of stories as cautionary tales, about how not to be with people who are course students or who aren't course students. Whatever your path is, what we are always asking for is kindness, whether we're doing that in a kind way ourselves or whether we're kind of acting out of our insanity. I mean, we seem to be coming from a place of fear or jealousy. Underneath that behavior is really a plea to see us with eyes of love. And I think if we can remember that as we go through our lives, it just makes everything so much easier, because it means that our appropriate response to everything that's happening is an attitude of joy, happiness, and appreciation. So I think the more that we can bring that to our lives, the easier things can get. So there was one section from the course workbook that I wanted to read today, and it is lesson 104. I seek but what belongs to me in truth. I'm just going to read the first paragraph here. Today's idea continues with the thought that joy and peace are not but idle dreams. They are your right, because of what you are. They come to you from God, who cannot fail to give you what he wills. Yet must there be a place made ready to receive his gifts. They are not welcomed gladly by a mind that has instead received the gifts and made where his belong as substitutes for them. So I think that this really emphasizes that we need to let go of our false beliefs. We need to let go of the things in us that are not in alignment with truth. It's not that we need to cultivate truth or increase the truth in us. We really just need to let go of our opposition to it, because it is what we are. And when all those walls are gently removed, all that's left is the beautiful nature of Christ that shines through each and every one of us.
That's exactly right. And, as you had mentioned, with situations where people are showing up and reminding each other of, if you're ill, then you're not practicing the course properly. I think probably the most important part of being committed to the journey and being, invested in doing the work is to recognize when silence has its most appropriate moment, and to have, that, to extend that grace of silence. You don't have to say anything to somebody. But if you want to contribute to their awakening and to their healing journey, you don't turn into the schoolmarm wagging a finger in front of them. What you do is you go inside and ask the Holy Spirit, let me see the Christ within this person. And if you are doing your work, then you're making a positive contribution to whatever they're trying to do as far as the struggle that they're engaged in their own healing journey. So a lot of times it's not about what you say outwardly, but it's what you ask for inwardly that makes a profound difference and does in fact advance you and everybody associated with that particular part of the illusion that we're working with.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Well, Barrett, I'm getting ready to go pick cherries and plums and radishes and who knows what. So
All right.
I'm going to go out and embrace the sun and dance in the sunlight, and I assume that you'll probably be doing the same.
I'm definitely going to get some vitamin D out there today. I'm looking forward to it. So Yeah, just as a heads up for our upcoming talks, we are going to continue looking at the Manual for Teachers. You know, a few months ago, we did the whole 10 characteristics of a teacher of God. And we're just going to continue through the manual. There's so many gems in there. So for the next number of weeks, we'll be using that as kind of a basis for a lot of our talks. And yeah, I think it's going to be fun.
I think it's going to be great. Well, Barrett, I will see you in 1 week, and we'll be starting with chapter or section 5 of the Manual for Teachers. And,
Right? Yeah.
You
Have
guys,
fun picking your fruits and vegetables and getting out in the garden. That's always a good thing.
yes, absolutely. Well, I'll see you in 1 week.
All right. Sounds good. Bye, Chris.
Goodbye.